When you close your eyes and picture American food, what do you see? I bet for most of you, it's that one iconic meal. A sizzling patty, cheese, some sauce, all between two buns.
The hamburger, it's the undisputed edible flag of the U.S.
Exactly. But if you step back and think about it, think about global staples. Here's the real question for our deep dive today. Why the hamburger? Why not a steaming bowl of rice?
That is such a crucial question. It really forces you to look past just what we like to eat. We're diving into sources today that explore this whole, geographic and cultural destiny. And the most fascinating part is that the outcome, the hamburger, it was pretty much decided centuries ago, long before anyone even thought of putting a patty on a bun.
Right. So we're not here to just analyze McDonald's success or something like that. We're going much deeper. We're asking, why did the American landscape, its history, its industry, and its culture all line up to make the hamburger? Well, inevitable. What was written in the soil, so to speak.
The sources make the core argument very, very clear. The single answer is that the U.S. was fundamentally shaped by a formula, not by a sandwich. The formula was wheat plus meat plus industry.
Huh.
And the hamburger is just the symbol of that. It's the efficient, mass-produced result of the formula, not the cause of it. So we really have to unpack the forces that made it all possible in the first place.
Okay, let's do that. Let's unpack it, starting at the very beginning. Geography. How much of this was decided just by the climate and the shape of North America?
A huge amount. I mean, just look at East Asia, where rice is the unquestioned king. Rice requires these very specific, very intense conditions. You need monsoon rains, you need complex water management, terrace farming. It demands this massive organized communal labor, what the sources call wet labor, in these very particular environments.
It's a whole system. It's not just planting a seed.
It's an entire system of cooperative engineering, and that is fundamentally at odds with the whole philosophy that drove the settlement of North America.
Okay, so contrast that for us. What did North America have instead?
Well, what did it have in abundance, especially as you move west of the Appalachians? Wide, flat plains, huge navigable rivers, and a much drier climate across the most important farmland. It was totally unsuitable for that kind of wet labor, but it was perfect. Absolutely perfect for mechanizing wheat and corn.
So the machine was the deciding factor. The efficiency of a tractor over the high-yield but labor-intensive rice paddy.
Absolutely. The machine was the variable. You could cultivate these vast tracts of land with plows, with seeders, with harvesters, and you needed far, far fewer people per acre than a rice paddy does. The economic result of that, an immediate, overwhelming abundance of cheap bread, cheap flour, cheap corn.
And rice just got left behind.
It got relegated to these little niches, right? You see it in places like South Carolina, Louisiana, where the conditions were just right. But for the rest of the country, the American staple was always going to be grain-based, but structurally, it just couldn't be rice.
That economic foundation makes perfect sense. So let's move from the farm to the factory floor, because this is where that ideology of speed takes over and really hammers that reality into the handheld meal we know today.
Yes, and what's so fascinating is how the physical demands of preparing the food start to perfectly mirror the demands of the industrial society that was emerging.
Let's talk about the tempo of rice first.
Rice is slow. It demands continuity. You have to wash it, often rest it, and then the steaming process, it takes time. It ties you to a kitchen, to a table, and that rhythm dictates a slower, more communal meal, a long break.
But America, especially in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, it was running on a completely different clock. It was steam, steel, and a stopwatch.
Exactly. The core industrial ideology was ruthless efficiency. Time is money. Speed equals productivity. And that thinking translated directly into shrinking the lunch break. Imagine you're a factory worker in, say, 1910. You've got maybe 20, 30 minutes.
You can't do a proper rice meal in that time.
No way. You need maximum calorie density in minimum time. So the cultural pressure, it starts to filter for certain foods.
The winner had to be something you could eat quickly, maybe without cutlery, maybe without even sitting down.
That's the critical filter. The winner was the food that could be handheld, eaten with one hand, maybe while you're standing or moving, and this is crucial standardized. And this is where all those diverse immigrant food traditions coming into the U.S. collide with this demand for speed.
Talk a bit more about that immigrant kitchen angle. That part of the story gets lost sometimes.
Right. The hamburger isn't one single invention. It's this brilliant fusion of different needs. You have the German tradition of ground meat, like frikadeller. You have other quick seasoned meat patties. Then you have Dutch and English traditions giving us these quick rising standard bread forms.
So the immigrants brought the pieces.
They brought the components, but it was American industry that provided the speed and the standardization to turn those components into this uniform, replicable grab-and-go package. It was the sandwich concept, but optimized for pure velocity.
It's the ultimate delivery system. It packages your protein, your starch, your sauce into a perfectly sealed industrial container. It solves the worker's lunch problem instantly.
And that standardization, that ability to make the exact same product anywhere, anytime, well, that leads us right into the huge industrial infrastructure that basically guaranteed the hamburger's success.
Okay, let's get into that infrastructure, because the contrast between a Chicago meatpacking plant and a rice paddy, I mean, you can't get more different in terms of a labor model.
No, one is biological, it relies on rhythm and water and community. The other is purely mechanical and industrial. And the entire American system favored meat and bread because that's where you could get the biggest returns on your investment in efficiency.
So what were the key technologies that locked this in?
The sources point to three massive systems that sealed the deal. First, and maybe the most revolutionary, was the cold chain.
We hear that term a lot. What was its actual impact here?
Before the cold chain refrigerated rail cars, then truck's meat had to be slaughtered locally. The cold chain let you centralize everything in places like Chicago. It turned meat into an industrial commodity you could ship thousands of miles without it spoiling.
So it basically destroyed the local butcher model.
It did, and it enabled this massive centralized scale that made beef cheaper and more available than ever. So the cold chain solved the supply problem.
Okay, what about the processing?
That brings us to number two, the industrial meat grinder. Before this, ground meat was a bit of a specialty, or it was made from waste. The machine allowed processors to take cheaper, tougher cuts of meat, the stuff that wouldn't sell as a steak, and turn them into a uniform, stable, and, palatable patty. It democratized beef protein. It made the core of the hamburger affordable for everyone.
So you've solved supply with the cold chain and cost with the grinder.
Exactly. And the third piece was industrial bakeries using standardized bread molds. Every bun had to be identical to fit into the machines for slicing and packaging. This whole industrial trinity, transport, processing, packaging it, loved uniformity and speed.
And this entire process, this whole system, was essentially beta tested and perfected on a scale that only war could provide, right?
It absolutely was. The sources draw a direct line from military logistics, especially in World War II, straight into corporate America. The military supply chain needed food that was fast, high in calories, and completely standardized for troops on the move.
And trying to get every soldier a proper rice meal under those conditions would have been a nightmare.
Impossible. Rice was too slow, too water-intensive for that kind of high-speed logistical machine, so the logistics won out. And that connects this huge industrial victory to the final piece of the puzzle, cultural symbolism.
Right, because if you look at national identity, the symbolic meaning of these two foods could not be more different.
In Asia, rice isn't just food. It represents the essence of life, fertility, order, ritual. It demands respect. It's the center of the meal. To waste rice is to, violate a social contract.
And in the American psyche, what does meat, especially beef, symbolize?
Abundance, individual power, wealth. It's tied directly to that frontier mythology, the conquest, the massive cattle drives, this idea of endless resources, big portions, that feeling of being full. It all became a sign of success. The sources call the hamburger the edible logo of that entire American mythos.
It's individualism in a bun, the ability to eat this much protein this fast without needing a whole community around you.
Precisely. And that brings us to the thought experiment the sources encourage. This all seems so inevitable, right? But what if? What if somehow America had developed a rice-centric cuisine? How would that have changed the country?
Okay, let's go there. What's the first most obvious change?
The rhythm of life. The rhythm of eating would slow way down. Because rice demands you sit down, it's often served communally, you'd see a much greater emphasis on tables, on shared plates. The focus shifts from grabbing and running to connecting over food.
And that would have to change the nation's health profile.
Oh, without a doubt. A society built around rice and its accompaniments, vegetables, lighter proteins, would just structurally consume less saturated fat. Now, rice isn't a miracle cure, but the whole direction of public health would shift, likely with a drop in some of the metabolic diseases we associate with a high-speed, meat-heavy diet.
It would even reshape our cities, our urban planning.
Correct. The urban infrastructure would be completely different. Instead of prioritizing drive-thrus and quick service counters, cities would need to build in more sit-and-eat spaces. The whole food service ecosystem would be designed for lingering, for interaction.
And our work culture would have to change too.
You'd have longer, calmer meals because the food itself dictates that pace. And maybe, just maybe, the national identity would shift. From individual, quick gratification to an emphasis on the collective table, the idea of a shared meal.
It's amazing. If that had happened, America would have taken on the Asian tempo.
And conversely, Asia might have taken on more of the American speed. The food really does reflect the geography and the technology.
So after looking at all four forces, geography, speed, industry, and culture, we come back to that core argument. And it seems profoundly true. The hamburger's victory was a symptom, not a cause.
You have to reinforce it one last time. The hamburger did not make America. It is just the symbolic industrial stamp left by conditions that were already there, deep in the system.
Conditions like cheap wheat and corn, the affordability of meat because of the cold chain and the grinder, the cultural obsession with speed, which was battle-tested by the military, and finally the symbolic power of meat as the frontier myth.
And if the hamburger itself had never been invented, that role would have just been filled by something else. The hot dog. A standardized meatloaf sandwich. Something.
Because rice just couldn't overcome those deep-seated conditions. It's only now becoming more popular because of immigration and health trends. It's a challenger, but it's not replacing the king.
Which brings us to the single most memorable takeaway from all this. The one sentence that sums it all up.
And the quote is, "America didn't create the hamburger. America made the hamburger possible." It's a subtle difference, but it's everything. Cause versus consequence.
And for a final thought to leave you with, we focused on why rice was blocked across the big industrial landscape. But think about the specific American subcultures the sources mention where rice did win. Think about Cajun and Creole food. Think about sushi and poke. What were the unique conditions, the microclimates, the cultural needs that allowed rice to thrive and become the absolute staple in those specific American kitchens? That's something for you to mull over on your own.